Okay, good evening, everyone. I'll be reading from 2 Samuel chapter 6, and I'll do verses 1 to 15. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Bela in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with castanets, harps, lyres, tambourines, rattles, and cymbals. When they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark of God, because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. Therefore, God struck him down, and he died there beside the ark of God. Then David was angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah. And to this day, that place is called Perez Uzzah. David was afraid of the Lord that day and said, "How can the ark of the Lord ever come to me?" He was not willing to take the ark of the Lord to be with him in the city of David. Instead, he took it to the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite. The ark of the Lord remained in the house of Obed-Edom the Gittite for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. Now King David was told, "The Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has, because of the ark of God." So David went to bring up the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. Wearing a linen ephod, David was dancing before the Lord with all of his might, while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord with shouts and the sound of trumpets. Verse 16. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window. And when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. They brought the ark of the Lord and set it in its place inside the tent that David had pitched for it. And David sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before the Lord. After he had finished sacrificing the burnt offerings and the fellowship offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord Almighty, then gave a loaf of bread, a cake of dates, and a cake of raisins to each person in the whole crowd of Israelites, both men and women. And all the people went to their homes. When David returned home to bless his household, Michal, daughter of Saul, came out to meet him and said, "How the king of Israel has distinguished himself today, going around half naked in full view of the slave girls of his servants, as any vulgar fellow would." David said to Michal, It was before the Lord, who chose me rather than your father or anyone from his house, when he appointed me ruler over the Lord's people, Israel. I will celebrate before the Lord. I will become even more undignified than this, and I will be humiliated in my own eyes. But by these slave girls you spoke of, I will be held in honor. And Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death.
I wonder whether as the passage was read, it was immediately obvious what the most important thing was. I wonder whether you're already expecting the main points to revolve around something in particular. See, the Ark of the Lord, or the Ark of God, is everywhere. I counted through, and I may have missed it, but I reckon it's referenced at least 18 times in the chapter, either by name or in reference to it as it, because it's already been mentioned in a sentence. It's all over the place in what is not a particularly long chapter of Scripture. And so it is what goes on around the Ark of God that's going to teach us a lot, hopefully, this evening. So, again, at this point, we've reached in 2 Samuel, David is now king over all of the tribes of Israel, as was promised by God. And it's time, really, to get his house in order, so to speak. David is the Lord's anointed one. Israel are the Lord's people. And so the Lord needs to be at the centre of the kingdom. And the Lord's presence was bound up with the ark. The Ark of the Covenant, which was in many senses just a very simple wooden box overlaid with gold. It wasn't particularly very big, probably about this by this by this. So not a large box. We're not talking about a big thing here. But that was it. That was where God's presence dwelt with his people. Inside the box were the tablets of stone that Moses brought down from the mountain with the 10 Commandments on them. So God's rule was represented by the ark as well. And it was said that God was seated between the cherubim, who were kind of molded into the gold and the shape over the ark, over the box itself, that the Lord was seated there, and therefore the box was effectively his footstool. Now, obviously, God is everywhere, right? We learnt a few months ago with the kids some of the attributes of God, and one of them was that God is omnipresent. He's everywhere. So he is here, he's there, he is everywhere. And yet, for God's people in the Old Testament, he specially made his presence known, revealed himself to them there. This box, this ark that they were commanded to make and keep was important. And the importance of it is seen really in verse 1. David gathers together 30,000 men. Now, we almost expect verse 2 to go to war, but it's not. Verse 2 is, he sent his men to Bala in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name that is Yahweh, God, God's name, his character, the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. This is a big deal. There's no doubt about what the ark represents. It is abundantly clear who the God is who is associated with the ark. It is Yahweh. It is the Lord. It is the Lord God Almighty. And so look what they do. They set the ark of God on a new cart, brought it from the house of Abinadab, which is on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. Now, we might stop there and think, well, hold on a minute. If the ark is that important to God's people, why on earth is it not already in Jerusalem? Why was it not there all along? Why didn't David just arrive in Jerusalem as king and go, the ark's already here, brilliant, we're ready to go? We have to rewind quite a long way. We have to go all the way back to 1 Samuel chapter 4 to see the story of how the ark ended up where it was. So in 1 Samuel 4, the Philistines nick it. They fight against the Israelites, they beat them, and they carry off the ark. And they think, great, we'll put this in the temple of our god Dagon, and this will just show another victory for us and for our God. And then you get the really hilarious story. Well, it is hilarious. if you read it, it is funny. It is funny because Dagon's statue falls flat on its face, so they lift it back up again, they come back the next day, and not only has it fallen flat on its face, but it's got no head, no arms. And we're supposed to read it and laugh because it is funny. And the Philistines think, okay, we don't want this box anymore. Let's take it somewhere else. So they take it somewhere else, and that city in the Philistine territory has some terrible things happen to it, so they keep passing it around, and eventually, let's just get rid of this box altogether. We don't want anything to do with it. And so they put it on a cart with a couple of cows dragging it, and they send it packing into Israelite territory. And then it arrives there, and you can read more about that story from 1 Samuel 4 all the way through to 1 Samuel 7. But in 1 Samuel 7, 1 and 2, you find these words. So the men of Kiriath Jearim, which is another name for Bala in there, in verse 2 of our passage. The men of Kiriath Jearim came and took up the ark of the Lord. They brought it to Abinadab's house on the hill and consecrated Eleazar his son to guard the ark of the Lord. The ark remained at Kiriath Jearim a long time, 20 years in all. Now, the eagle-eyed of you will then have noticed a similarity between the movement of the ark by the Philistines and the movement of the ark by the Israelites in this chapter. They move it the same way. They move it on a cart. But that's not the specific way that God commanded the ark to be moved or designed it to be moved. Keep that in mind because it's going to become really important. We then read, don't we, there was a joyful noise that accompanied the ark on its journey. David and all the people with him are dancing and they are celebrating and they're playing all kinds of instruments there. Castanets, harps, lyres, tambourines, rattles, cymbals. It is really a happy cacophony of sound that is accompanying the ark's journey from Abinadab's house on the hill to Jerusalem. And they celebrate with all their might, and we'll come back to that in a minute, but we can imagine it, can't we? It's very much a carnival atmosphere. A big, joyful procession that if you saw it would bring a smile to your face. You'd be like, oh, great. What's going on here? This looks interesting. But then suddenly, all that noise and all that sound, all that celebration is dramatically cut short at the threshing floor of Nacon. And they arrive there. Uzzah reaches out his hand to take hold of the ark because the oxen stumble. And the Lord's anger burns against Uzzah because of his irreverent act. And therefore God struck him down and he died beside the ark of God. So all of this noise, all of this joyful, celebrating, dancing, singing that is accompanying the ark, you can imagine all of a sudden stops. Because one of their number is dead. It was all going so well. And yet in a single moment, which I imagine felt like one of those slow motion moments, I've had these as a parent, where you can see something is going to happen. Your child is about to pull something over on themselves, trip over something on the floor, and you think, I can see it, and I know what's going to happen, but I cannot get there to stop it. I imagine it's a bit like that. Maybe somebody saw the cart tumbling, and Uzzah reaching out and is thinking, don't touch. But by the time they could get there or see anything, he's touched it and he's dead. Now I think at this point in the story, as you read verse 6 and 7, I think we feel sorry for Uzzah, right? We read the story and think, poor guy. He was just trying to keep it steady. He was just trying to stop this really important box from falling off a cart and maybe getting damaged on the floor. It wasn't his fault the oxen stumbled. It wasn't his fault that necessarily they put it on a cart in the first place. It doesn't say it was Uzzah's idea. And so we wonder then, is God being a bit harsh? And actually it's a fair question to ask. There are times when we read passages of scripture and something will surprise us and we should ask questions of it. Now to answer that question, is this unfair? Should we feel sorry for Uzzah? Is God being harsh? We need to read Exodus 25 verses 14 and 15 and then Numbers 4 verse 15. I'll read the Exodus one first. It's 25 verses 14 and 15. It says this in the instructions of how to move and carry the ark. Insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry it. The poles are to remain in the rings of the ark. They are not to be removed. Then put in the ark the tablets of the covenant law which I will give you. And then Numbers 4 verse 5 says this. This was the instruction for when the Israelites were moving through the wilderness. After Aaron and his sons have finished covering the holy furnishings and all the holy articles, and when the camp is ready to move, only then are the Kohathites to come and do the carrying. But they must not touch the holy things or they will die. The Kohathites are to carry these things, those things that are in the tent of meeting. See, God had given really specific and really clear instructions to their people, to the people. Not only had he given clear instruction, but he'd given clear design. The ark was designed in such a way that nobody would ever have to touch it. Because once the poles were in the rings on the side, you only ever needed to touch the poles to pick it up and move it. One commentator, a guy called Dale Ralph Davis, comments on this and he says, basically the rules boil down to this: no touch, no look, no cart. Now, it doesn't say no cart, but the point is if it's being carried by poles, it doesn't need a cart. These things were special. They showed something about their God, and God had kindly and graciously warned them that if they didn't do it the way he'd said to do it, there would be a consequence. He didn't leave them to figure that out. He didn't say, right, just do this, but don't touch it. And somebody goes, well, why not touch it? Like, keep off the grass. Or why not stand on the grass? Like, he told them why, and he told them what would happen. What we see then in this passage in particular, and especially after reading Exodus 25 and Numbers 4, is that there is a seriousness to the holiness of God. Who God is and what God has said matter massively. God and his word, therefore, are not to be taken lightly, because it is literally a matter of life and death. We could put it really bluntly and say God's holiness is lethal. Now, we're not supposed to read anything into this about Uzzah's salvation. That's not really a point that the passage makes. It's the same as we're not supposed to read into 1 Corinthians 11 anything about the salvation of those who died because they approached the Lord's Supper the wrong way. But what we are supposed to see is that it doesn't matter how sincere a person's motives might be, they can be sincerely wrong. Uzzah's motives were probably good, but they were wrong. God desires the right thing done the right way. Just because Uzzah was trying to stop the ark from getting damaged maybe and thought he was doing a good thing doesn't mean his actions were any less sinful, or any less, as the passage describes them, irreverent. See, God calls all of us as his children to obey. He doesn't leave us with any loopholes. He calls us to live lives of submission to his word. So if God's word commands something or forbids something, then we take note of it. Uzzah learned that the hard way. We need to learn from his mistake. Now, we can try and justify our actions any way we want, but if those actions are sinful, we've got no excuse. Thought about a similar thing a couple of weeks ago. You want to go back and listen to it for some of those applications, go for it. In 2 Samuel 4, we thought about taking the Lord's name in vain, didn't we? And saying, actually, one of the ways we do that is by trying to justify our actions by appealing to the character of God. The temptation is always there for us. We've got to fight that temptation by knowing God's word well. We need to know what it says, because the word of God is what he's given us to teach us how to live in a fallen world. The word of God instructs us in how we are to worship God, and the word of God shows us what it looks like to live a life pleasing to the Lord. And so a question we need to ask ourselves is this: how will I get to know God better so that I can live to please him? Or how can I make sure I'm learning more of God's word so that I can be obedient to him? What changes might I need to make to enable me to do that, so I can make that a priority? But I think it raises another question, doesn't it? Because if we look at Uzzah here and say, well, he approached the ark of God and touched it and died, what does that mean for how you and I are supposed to approach God? Is it impossible? Is God completely unapproachable? I mean, look to the New Testament and see what it tells us about how we should approach God. And one of the best verses to do this, I think, is in Hebrews 4 and verse 16. Though that verse tells us that because we have a great high priest, it says, let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. With confidence, it says. Hold on a minute. How are we supposed to approach with confidence? We've just watched Uzzah die because he touched the ark of God. God is still holy. Yes, he hasn't changed. God never changes. We therefore cannot treat God lightly or irreverently. He's not our warm, fuzzy friend in the sky. Well, the Bible tells us that we can approach God with boldness, with confidence, because of Christ. Because Christ is our great high priest who carries us into the Father's presence. We have access to God because when Jesus died on the cross, the curtain that separated the room where the Ark of the Covenant was kept in the temple from everything else was ripped in two, from top to bottom. Jesus' death had paid the price for sin. His perfect righteousness is then credited to all those who trust in him. So we can now approach with confidence, not because of anything we've done or anything we can do, but because of what Jesus has already done. Yes, we need to examine our hearts. Yes, our attitudes matter. Yes, we are called to worship in spirit and truth. But we don't need to fix ourselves to come to God. If we think we have to fix ourselves to come to God, we will never come to God. Because we can never fix ourselves. And there aren't special items that we need to avoid touching now in buildings, so it's not like, well, I shouldn't touch the pulpit, that's just for Matt. That would be madness, wouldn't it? I mean, it would be crazy. There aren't even sacrifices or processes that we need to go through to be able to meet with God because Jesus has fulfilled every one of those things. Jesus, what the ark represents, we now find in Christ. God's presence. He's now given us his Spirit who lives in us and with us. We thought about that this morning. We can now come to God with boldness and with confidence through Jesus Christ and through him alone. And look what happens next. Verse 8. David is angry because the Lord's wrath had broken out against Uzzah, and to this day the place is called Perez Uzzah. David says, well, hold on a minute, how can I possibly take the ark to Jerusalem when this has happened? It's never going to get to the city of David, he says. And so instead he takes it to this guy's house, Obed-Edom. It's there for 3 months, and the Lord blessed him and his entire household. See, David is angry. Maybe David is angry because he thought God was wrong to kill Uzzah. Maybe David is angry because he thought Uzzah had been foolish. Maybe David is angry because he realized he should have known how to take the ark in the first place. Maybe he's just angry because his plans to bring the ark to Jerusalem are ruined. Whatever it is, David is angry, but David is also afraid. See, in the last chapter, the Lord had broken out against David's enemies. But the very same word is used here, that the Lord had broken out against Uzzah. I guess one of David's friends, we could probably say. He was on his side, wasn't he? He was helping him. And David's fear here is not that reverent fear that we talk about, standing in awe of who God is in amazement. This is David being scared. So much so that he abandons his plans. Now, wonderfully for Obed-Edom, 3 months of the ark being in his house mean 3 months of blessing for him and his whole household. And just to make sure we get the point that happened, the report then comes to David and it says exactly the same thing. King David was told, the Lord has blessed the household of Obed-Edom and everything he has because of the ark of God. The presence of the Lord, a very simple truth there, the presence of the Lord brings blessing. It's a very profound but a very simple truth, isn't it? The presence of the Lord brings blessing. Now that's true for us as well, isn't it? The Lord is with us always. When we were saved, the Holy Spirit came to live in us and with us. And so the Lord is present. But we also know the blessing of gathering together with other believers. We experience an added blessing together as brothers and sisters in Christ when we meet with the Lord together. And when David hears that news, he's re-energized, isn't he? Right, let's do it. Let's get back to the idea that we were doing before. This time the ark is carried. We're not told it's carried with the poles, slotted, but we know it's carried. It's not on a cart. And so we go, okay, they've got it right this time. But then the way the rest of the story is told, it is set up for us to see a contrast between David and Michal. So look what we're told about what David does as the ark is being moved. And then we'll think about what Michal does afterwards. It says, so David went up to bring the ark of God from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with rejoicing. When those who were carrying the ark of the Lord had taken 6 steps, he sacrificed a bull and a fattened calf. That must have taken a while. Stood still there after 6 steps. I don't know how long it took to do that, but it was part of the process here. David is wearing a linen ephod, it says, and David was dancing before the Lord with all his might. And while he and all Israel were bringing up the ark of the Lord, the shouts and with the sound of trumpets. And then it goes on and says, as the ark entered Jerusalem, David is leaping and dancing before the Lord. He then puts the ark in the tent, makes sacrifices, and then he generously blesses all of God's people who are gathered and sends them home. Twice we're told, aren't we, that David and those with him danced with all their might. This is a full-blooded, wholehearted, hold nothing back worship of the Lord. It's like David can't help but be joyful. It's like, this is it. God's presence is coming to be in the city, and it's now all going to be exactly how it was supposed to be. For the minute, forget the leaping and dancing, okay? Because some of you will cringe at leaping and dancing. What I want to ask ourselves is this. Whether the heart that David has behind his exuberance is something we share. David danced with all his might. He just wasn't bothered. He threw his whole body and soul into it. And I wonder whether that makes us cringe because there's a problem in our hearts, or whether it's because it's just not something we'd ever do for anything. You might never want to sing and dance and leap and throw yourself into anything, which is fine. But is there a pride in us that stops us from showing and expressing our emotions and our joy before the Lord physically? We're too bothered about what other people are going to think to freely worship the Lord like this. David then says, I'll be even more undignified and I'll humiliate myself even more. Why? Because it's all about the Lord for David. He's bothered first and foremost about the Lord, that the Lord gets the praise, that the Lord gets the honour, that the Lord gets the glory that is due to him, and he doesn't care what that makes him look like. Think of massive public displays of affection. Again, something that'll make some of you cringe, right? Big declarations of love, you might see it, I don't know, on a train or in a town centre or in a film, right? Whether you've witnessed one in real life or not, you've definitely seen one in a film. Does the person declaring their love care who's listening? No. Well, apart from the person they're declaring their love to, they want them to listen. But do they care who else is there? No. Do they care what they look like to anybody else? No, absolutely not, because the focus is all on the object of their affection. For David, that's it here. It is because he loves the Lord that he's free. Free to express that love and that devotion in a way that, we'll see in a minute, Michal thinks looks foolish. But David's not bothered. We also notice that David's joy in the Lord leads to generosity. Again, I don't have time to really think about this, but it's an interesting thing, isn't it? That focus for David is on the Lord, on the ark coming into Jerusalem, and what that leads David to do is be generous. Every man and woman present gets this parcel of food, basically. Joy and delight together is then shared. Makes David generous. But contrast all this with Michal. Look what it says about her. As the ark of the Lord was entering the city of David, Michal, daughter of Saul, watched from a window, and when she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she despised him in her heart. And then he goes on to say, when David returned home, so this is after he's generously blessed all of those around him, he goes home to bless his own household, and Michal, daughter of Saul, comes out to meet him and says, oh, how the king of Israel has distinguished himself today. I mean, that is dripping with sarcasm. Going around half naked in view of the slave girls and his servants, as any vulgar fellow would. What is Michal's problem? Basically, she thinks David has behaved in a way that is unbecoming of a king. In her mind, he's embarrassed himself. He's looked like a fool. But she's missed the point, hasn't she? It doesn't matter that David was wearing a linen ephod rather than his kingly robes. It doesn't matter that David was leaping and dancing. None of that matters. David was wholeheartedly worshipping the Lord. He's not doing anything sinful. He's just unashamedly worshipping the Lord with his whole being. And whether people think it's foolish or not, David didn't care. I'll give you an example. Grown men sing at the top of their lungs completely out of tune for their team, whether it's their rugby team, their football team, or whatever other team they support in a sport. They jump around like maniacs when points are scored or goals are scored. They even hug strangers. I've done that. Hugged strangers at football matches, fallen on strangers, had strangers fall on me. Tom's smiling because he's done the same. And I've not done this, but it's because I don't really cry, but they cry at emotional injury time goals that are conceded. And they don't care. They don't care. They don't care if their face is on the screen, broadcast to the world, because they're overcome with what they're watching. David corrects Michal's wrong thinking. Actually, David says, look, you're saying the servant girls are going to look down on me because of this. They're not, actually. They will see my commitment to the Lord and it will bring honour. David has done the right thing in bringing the ark to Jerusalem. It is a powerful picture, as we said, of God being at the centre of the kingdom. And that should be cause for great rejoicing and celebrating, whether Michal thinks it looks foolish or not. We've already said our worship of the Lord should be wholehearted and unreserved. And that will look different for each of us. I'm not saying we should all be singing and dancing, okay? Please do not come to me afterwards and say, Matt, I don't want to sing and dance. You don't have to. But my point is, where's your heart at? Is it wholeheartedly devoted to Jesus? Are we worshipping Jesus with all of our being? Because if I'm honest, I jump around like a maniac at the football and never do that in church. I'm not saying I should do that. But actually, I don't really care what everybody else around me at the football is thinking. I quite often care what other people in church think. But why is that? Why is that? I've got to ask that question. You've got to ask that question too, if that's the case. But there is something we need to learn from Michal's attitude to make sure we don't fall into it. And I think that's looking down on and discrediting the worship of other believers. I think we are in danger in our hearts of despising potentially those who do want to dance or do want to raise their hands or fall on their knees in public worship. What would our response be if some of our brothers and sisters in Christ did that next week? What would our response be if there were loud hallelujahs declared as part of the worship service? We need to allow the word of God here to expose our hearts. Some of us will rightly be wary of particular styles of sung worship and worship services because of the association with particular theological positions. And some of us have experienced in previous churches abuses of the spiritual gifts that have split churches. And in our minds, all of that is all tied up together, and we can potentially believe all of it is then inherently wrong. We've got to ask ourselves, what practices in worship have we looked down on that actually aren't unbiblical, but we've treated them as though they are? What things have we resisted simply because we don't like them? Or because past experiences have told us that we should avoid them? When actually they could well be wonderful, wholehearted expressions of worship to the Lord done rightly. David's worship of the Lord is bold, it is expressive, it is unashamed. And we're supposed to see that as the good model here, and Michal's critical spirit as the wrong one. Before we wrap up, we do have to answer a question that's probably ringing in your mind about the last verse. Verse 23. Michal, daughter of Saul, had no children to the day of her death. Seems like a throwaway line at the very end of the chapter, but it raises a question, doesn't it? Why? Now, we aren't told why. We can't actually answer the question why, because the passage doesn't give us the answer. We don't get a narrator's comment that explains why. Could be because David and Michal's relationship is effectively over. It's already been quite cold. Maybe this is just a sign that they never slept together again. Some have argued it's a punishment from God for her attitude towards the Lord and the ark. Now, we don't know and we can't say for sure. What we can say for sure in general is that being childless is not a punishment from God. Please don't go away with that idea from this verse. If childlessness is something you've struggled with, then please share that with somebody who you know and trust and talk about it. Pray about it. I know that ultimately God is sovereign and good. We've said that a lot in the last few weeks, particularly in Revelation, but also here. And actually God understands the pain of that, and God tells us in his word that he is the God of all comfort in that too. And as we come to a close, then we've got to leave ourselves with the big picture in mind. This passage teaches us that our God is a holy God. He's told us who he is, and he's told us how he wants us to live in his word. And he's told us as well that he wants to bless us with his presence. The right response then from us is a response of reverent fear, not scared fear. The right response is a wholehearted obedience and worship. And the right response is joy. I guess what we can say is we have to simultaneously respond with rejoicing and trembling.